How do you feel about Coca-Cola sponsoring COP?
Hey, Prabhu. I said, I will get an electric vehicle when I can charge my car with clean energy. Please go ahead and afford that AC and own that AC and enjoy that AC. But make sure you don't reduce the temperature below 24 degrees. Mother Earth is going to tell us all that. अगर पैसा कमाना है तो करना पड़ेगा boss.
Hi, this is Dia Mirza. I've had such a wonderful time interacting with Sadhika on News and Views. We've spoken about COP27. We've spoken about where do we stand in human history and what is the role that we play as a part of capitalist societies, consumerist societies, and just getting to know what and how choices can define our lives. You can catch this conversation on the podcast across all the Quint platforms. I hope you'll tune in, and I look forward to your feedback and your comments.
Welcome, Dia, to our podcast News and Views. And the last time we spoke, we were talking about how the global north and the global south and the politics of climate finance sort of works. And sort of we had a lot to look forward to. There were a lot of hopes pegged onto COP27. When I was following these negotiations, and I'm sure you were as well because you were clued in, you were the United Nations Secretary General's advocate for Sustainable Development Goals. How did you feel following these negotiations? I had a full roller coaster of emotions. I was disappointed, and then I'm like, what is happening? And then finally, it was not as bad. So how did you feel?
I felt exactly the same, Sadhika. I think it's natural. But I think it's so important for us to keep in mind and remember that the world is at play here. There is a lot of geopolitics at play. There are all kinds of stakeholders at those negotiation tables. And there is obviously the outcome that has formed a significant relief for all of us, which is the establishment of the Loss and Damage Fund. The nuances of this, of course, we will discover in the coming months. I know in March we'll have more details on that, and then COP28 will define it even further. But I think the all-in-all summation of the COP27 for all of us should be that there is heightened awareness. There is a significant shift in the actions people are willing to take. There was such a lot of, from COP21, where we arrived at the Paris Agreement to, limit global temperatures to 1.5 pre-industrial, to where we find ourselves right now. I think there is more work being done than ever before. Yes, in an ideal situation, we would want that work to be accelerated by like a zillion, right? But
massively sped up.
Yeah, but at least finally the world concurs and understands and acknowledges that there is a price for climate change. Those innocent farmers who are dealing with the consequences of climate change are the most innocent and vulnerable part of this crisis, and they deserve better. And the Loss and Damage Fund, I think, in a way, ensures that they are not ignored, they are not neglected, and we can find a way to ensure that those who have must provide to those who don't have enough to combat the climate crisis.
Correct. So for our listeners, loss and damage basically is a type of fund. It's a category of climate finance, which basically the developed countries give to the developing countries. Essentially, loss and damage essentially means what has been lost and damaged because of climate change. It's sort of reparations, and climate change is happening and we're dealing with it. Countries like India and Africa and developing countries are dealing with it because of the historical pollution that the developed world did. So now they sort of owe us this money because polluters pay. But
well, they owe us a lot more, right? And actually, I hesitate from saying them and us because we're all in it together. Right. But yes, the global north historically has been the most significant contributors to this problem that we are experiencing. And there is a commitment that was made in 2009. Of course, now the commitment has to be $1 trillion annually. We're still not seeing stakeholders come forward and make that payment, right? To start sending that money out. And I honestly feel that until you have a legal document binding countries to do this, it's not really going to happen. Hopefully, COP28 will be that point in human history where we actually have countries come forward and say, okay, this is the money that needs to be paid. This is how it's going to be paid. And we're going to pay it now.
Because it surprises me sometimes, for real, it looks like a Ekta Kapoor daily soap where these people are saying like they're sincere, serious adults on a global forums promising that we're going to do this. And then they just slyly dodge it and they're like, oh, but yeah, we said, but we did. Oh, this reminds me. I'm sure you've heard the EU, the EU, essentially, they were like, listen, we don't believe in the concept of loss and damage, but since you've been asking us, we'll pay a little bit. And then, but I believe like still, I think it's a historical sort of agreement to get 200 nations to agree on something, anything. So I think
there's phenomenal details. I mean, very important details available on the UNFCCC site. So if anybody is interested in understanding what this loss and damage fund is, why it should exist, who is going to pay who, please go check out the details on the site.
Or watch the climate change dictionary. We've simplified it.
Absolutely.
Yeah, also, I'll just digress from the topic a little bit. I mean, this is you've been doing this, you've been sort of a part of this conversation for years now. It's been a while since you've been doing this, so you understand how this functions. But the industry that you come from...
The God's honest truth is that I don't. You know, I just don't. Because I'm like a child. I'm like any child who understands that the crisis is real. It's affecting everyone, everywhere. And I'm baffled. I'm just as baffled as any kid in any part of the world with the way world leaders respond to this crisis. And the fact that, my God, it is taking so much out of those who are trying to help people understand and educate them. You know, the science is evidenced. Everything is out there for these people to see and learn from and act upon. And still it's such a challenge.
Nothing is happening. Correct.
No, but something is happening, not nothing.
Something is happening.
We've made some progress.
Little, very, very slowly. We're moving at a snail's pace. But also, the industry that you come from, largely, I mean, is infamous, I'm sorry, but for the lack of a better word, to not have an opinion on a lot of things. And climate change is also not a political issue in terms of like the politics of the nation. It's not a controversial issue. And I believe it's not even a point of contention anymore. Like, we know what is happening right now, right? Like everybody. Does it sometimes get a little frustrating for you personally to when you're probably trying to I just want to understand, okay, since you feel so passionately about it, and the last time we spoke, you also told me how SDGs are very personal to you. I mean, this is not just something you talk about. It's become a part of how you look at life. It's become a part of your perspective. So for somebody who has such sensibilities, does it sometimes get a little frustrating for you when people around you are not understanding or don't think it's important? Or do people say, I mean, how do these conversations pan out? I just want to understand, like,
Sadhika, I think what is very unfortunate is that even if somebody is thinking about it or acting on it at a personal level, they are not vocalizing it enough. They're not actually going out there and doing what is required. We need many more people in the media industry to start supporting ecological restoration, speak up on the climate crisis. Of course, more than anything else, demand that climate change features on every single election mandate. Every single politician should be talking about climate change and telling us what they're going to be doing to address climate change, because that impacts everything. It impacts job security, food security, social health,
agriculture,
health,
unemployment, everything, correct.
Everything, right? Yeah. So to make it a vote bank issue, we need more people to start vocalizing that. And it's very unfortunate that no one... So I'm just responding to the fact that you're saying this is not even a political issue, but still people don't talk about it. Damn right. It needs to become a political issue. It needs to become a political issue. So that's number one. And number two, yes, we need many more people to start talking about it, demanding action, asking questions, and working with governments on climate action. I'm personally not in favor of just pointing fingers. I think it's so important to work with policymakers and government across states to help them build solutions and work on solutions. That's one. Two, I think we are unfortunately a part of a system that drives consumerism. So the moment we align ourselves with climate action, I think there are many things that I find myself saying no to that I perhaps would have said yes to over a decade ago, right? There are so many jobs that I say no to. There's so many people or associations I say no to because I know it's counterintuitive for me to do it at this stage of my life because I'm so aligned with the work that we're trying to do.
Of course.
And it's hard for everyone to say no to many of those things. So I don't blame them for not publicly aligning themselves with climate and climate action, because then what's going to happen with their advertising revenue? What is going to happen with all the things that will drive the capital they want to create for themselves? So,
and I will ask you one question. You can choose to not answer it if you don't want. But have you had to turn down?
You understand what I'm saying, right?
100%.
And I find it so hard. I have had experience where I've reached out to so many of my colleagues in the recent past, and of course before as well, to just drive funding towards conservation efforts, to drive funding towards good work that good people are doing. And I don't think twice when somebody approaches me for money, when it is anything to do with ecological restoration or conservation work. I just sign a check and hand it out, because that is the most important and urgent work of our times. But if you look at even the CSR budgets and how many people are actually investing in ecological restoration and climate resilience and clean energy and all of that, it's a very, very small number of people. So I don't know whether people really understand how important it is to now start diverting capital towards such work, and also just feeling more generous towards what is really needed and important.
Correct. But have
it's so hard to get actors to give money for anything to do with wildlife and ecological restoration. It's too hard.
Have you had to turn down like endorsements or brand deals because these brands were not climate conscious, so to say?
Absolutely.
Does it come at a cost? I mean,
of course the cost that it comes at is that you're basically refusing revenue. You're refusing. I mean, I can have the Robin Hood mentality where I say, I'll make all this money from this, and then I'll put it back. I do that sometimes. But if I know that a company is a red flag because they're polluting, because they're unethical, or they're not aligned with climate action, then I don't want to have anything to do with that company. And I've outright refused. Yeah.
How do you feel about Coca-Cola sponsoring COP?
Hey, Prabhu.
Difficult question, I knew. But I get it. We're all divided, right? And also, on some level, I genuinely feel like it's bad and it's wrong. And of course, all of that. Coca-Cola is one of the biggest polluters in the world. But come on, you're doing all of that pollution. You better pay for something good as well, right? So I don't know. I'm a little divided.
But that is the problem of our world. We have operated on a double moral. You can't say, I will pollute, I will kill, I will destroy forests. But I have created employment. I have generated wealth. That is the model of capitalism that has led us in the direction that we find ourselves in, right? At the point that we are in human history. So that double moral, I think, has to be seriously addressed. I totally agree that if a company like Coca-Cola is doing good and wants to stand by something and support something as significant as the COP27, then great. But then they also have to commit to recycling every single piece of plastic that they put out into the world. Because we have the data, we have the statistics. It just feels like a bit of an irony that you can be such a significant polluter, but then go on and do something like this. So that has to change. I had worked with a foundation that Coca-Cola had set up in India, and I faced that dichotomy as well, because I was basically asked to join the board of a foundation called Anandana that Coca-Cola has set up in India. And the foundation has nothing to do with Coca-Cola directly, other than the fact that we use the CSR money to generate water in India. So building check dams, recharging groundwater, helping local rural communities become more water resilient is the work that Anandana was doing. And the work is phenomenal. And I remember at the time I asked Chief Justice Verma, who is the chair of the foundation, whether it would be right for me to join the foundation. And he said, absolutely, because good work is happening here. And it's only when we do good work can we help these people understand that they need to do better overall. And I know that this engagement itself, and of course these questions that everybody has asked all over the world, will make Coca-Cola introspect and hopefully do better as well.
I hope it does. Also, I mean, in my newsroom, because I'm somebody who's talking about climate all the time, people are like, oh, now she's come, now she's going to like make that climate change link. So I'm sure, and it translates, because when a lot of your energy is invested in something so much, it translates into other things as well. For instance, I'm sure in your conversations, I'm like the makeup you buy, the clothes you wear, it translates into everything eventually, right?
Absolutely.
So when you are and I don't know, I mean, I might not know better, but the film industry is a very profit-driven industry. People are here to make business, get things done and move ahead, right? And nobody really has the time to sort of constantly take care of the environment or so, I mean, I don't know, like, does it happen with you sometimes when people are like, oh, why are you being so activisty? I mean, come on, nobody cares about it. How does it matter? Do you hear that?
Activisty. I love that term. Sadhika, I have been accused of being an activist since I was very young. So I'm totally like immune to that accusation. It's fine. I think every one of us should be active citizens, because if we are not active, then are we dead? Right?
Correct.
So citizenship should be active. And even if you're accused of being an activist, it's perfectly fine. Yes. Actions connected to climate can be disconcerting, can be inconvenient, and can be often viewed as annoying by many people. And that's fine, because climate consciousness has not become the norm yet. People are not operating from a place of that consciousness, right? But when people start learning, we start doing better. I'll give an example, Sadhika. 7 years ago, I started walking around with my metal bottle, right? Started that hashtag traveling bottle. Today, I see complete strangers at airports, at railway stations, in meetings, in conferences, at offices, in schools, everywhere, carrying their metal bottles.
Plastic bottles, correct. And everybody stopped carrying plastic bottles.
Everybody hasn't stopped carrying.
I mean, everybody hasn't, like, it's become like a statement.
Exactly. More people than ever before are refusing single-use plastic bottles, are carrying their own water bottles. Now, when I started out, people made fun of me, they mocked me, they ridiculed me, they said I was crazy. But I think the point, Sadhika, is that if we know better, we have to do better. And the only way we can do better is to consciously make choices every day in our lives. Even though our choices may seem inconvenient to others and may be far removed from the norm, we have to keep empowering ourselves with better choices, and of course, with those, bring the changes that we need to in our everyday lives. And even if at some point we're like the butt of somebody's joke, eventually I think people will recognize the merit in those actions and follow through, just like it happened with the case of the traveling bottle.
And I think it's with several other life choices that you've made, like several.
Yeah,
things
so that
I
was actually
coming
to a discussion that I was having with my husband the other day, where we were talking about switching to electric vehicles. So right now we're driving the cars we've had for many years. And I was like, what do you think about going electric? And the point that I was making was, I'd rather continue using the car I'm using right now because I feel like my carbon footprint on that would be lower than if I, whatever, turned this in and got another car. Specifically because we're not using clean energy to electrify, basically charge our e-cars, right? Yet, we're still depending on
coal-generated electricity.
Coal-generated electricity to charge our cars. So I said, I will get an electric vehicle when I can charge my car with clean energy. So it felt like a fair debate for us to have. I could be totally wrong. It's something that I'm still trying to understand because they've been, for and counter. I've been told that until more and more e-vehicles come on the road, the generation or the source of supply for their energy is not going to, that switch is not going to happen. The state is not going to provide clean energy unless there are a significant number of electric vehicles on the road. So
correct.
It's the chicken and egg situation.
Correct.
The point is that I think we all have ways and means to be better citizens of the planet, and we have to keep finding and making choices that we can. Yeah.
So have you seen this TV show on Netflix called The Good Place?
No, I haven't.
It is fun. You should. But there's an episode. It's a very interesting. So there's this person. Basically, it's about how the good place is like the heaven, the bad place is like hell, and people, depending on what they're doing, are either sent to heaven or hell. And now, over the years, since they have not updated the point system, nobody has gone to the good place in years. And that's simply because there is no ethical consumption in a capitalist world. So they find the best person who's living. This person's living in a farm. They grow their own potatoes and everything like that, their tomatoes, and nothing is everything that you can imagine someone to possibly do. They're doing. But still ultimately, so you do one thing right, but then you understand, like, it's so sort of convoluted that you do one thing right and then something else doesn't happen. So do you sometimes feel that maybe there is no ethical consumption in the capitalist world anymore?
Tough one, right? Because I think we are all confronted by that one. I always tell my husband, I said, maybe we just need to become hermits and live in the mountains and forage and become foragers, like forage for food and consume nothing other than the basic water and food that we need every day. So don't own anything. But we can't do that. That is not the reality we live in.
Correct.
And I think what we all need to do is to practice some level of minimalism and bring some amount of conscious consumption into our lives. And I think that if we can all even make basic changes like refuse single-use plastics, compost and segregate garbage at home, become responsible for the waste that we generate, plant more trees and support organizations that are restoring ecosystems or protecting environments and wildlife and forests, or even do something as basic as invest in companies that are making better choices or making cleaner and safer, whether it's food or clothes or whatever it is, accessible to people. I think we'd be doing, what we need to. Because imagine if everybody started doing that, what a huge shift that would make. Because we know that a significant percentage of global emissions is connected to households, right? Which is why I think our Prime Minister has launched this new campaign called Life, where he's saying,
yes.
Yeah, where he basically says what I've been trying to say for the last few years.
No, but you also understand, I think it's so cool. Like, I remember one of the American presidents had once said that, sure, we're here for climate change, but the American lifestyle is non-negotiable. So we can't really reduce our emissions. But then for a country like India, where a large part of our emissions still go to providing basic electricity, education, tap water, right? And if we can turn around and say...
See, but the fact of the matter is that we are the third highest emitters, right? We are we are creating a significant amount of carbon emission, and that has to change because we also have the second largest and soon to become the largest population in the world. We need to be able to provide clean air for our citizens to breathe. We need to be able to provide clean water for them to drink and food to eat. And all of this is right to life. It's a right to dignity. It's
Do you also sometimes...
to...
I mean, it's a very T-shirt worthy quote that I recently, I don't know, out of nowhere said that carbon aspirations need carbon emissions. Now, I understand that maybe there should not be an AC in the house, or there should not be 7 ACs in the house. But for someone who's been able to afford an AC for the first generation, it's aspirational. Now, is it entirely fair for us to turn around and say, hey, listen, we've polluted so much that now that you can finally afford, you please don't? So do you think that is also, especially in
please go ahead and afford that AC and own that AC and enjoy that AC, but make sure you don't reduce the temperature below 24 degrees.
Right, correct.
So that's the basic that we can do, right? So that is the level of consciousness that we're talking about. Where, come on, Sadhika, you and I both know how many households actually segregate waste. How many people are willing to manage something as basic as the waste that they create in their households? Now, imagine the quantifying impact and the ripple effect if every household, every school, every hospital, every corporation, every industry, everyone just decided to become responsible for their waste. How much pollution we would bring out, how much stress on landfills we would reduce, how much pollution of soil, of water, of air we would be able to, mitigate. So this is not really, because, you and I can always say that, but the fact of the matter is that the biggest emitters or polluters are less than 1% of the world's population. It's true. But the rest of us are dealing with the consequences, and the rest of us have the opportunity to bring about change. And we must.
Correct.
I mean, we can all raise our hands and say, we don't need to do this.
But, I mean, some people will have to do the good work, like you're doing.
Yeah.
So, now finally see, like for instance, when climate finance, the conversation was established, or when historical polluter, the fact was established that, listen, you did a little more than we did, actually a lot more than we did. You're probably majorly responsible for where we all are right now. So
yeah, you created climate chaos.
Correct. So then these were big landmarks, right, when these things were decided on. And then they sort of decided the vocabulary for climate negotiations for the time to come. Do you think it's the same with the setting up of loss and damage funds? Even though right now we don't have details, and from how we've seen things go, it might take a while for them to get in place, and then $5 trillion or how much, $500 billion dollars, or how much, trillion. What is the, correct, how
the
much do we...
The commitment is $1 trillion annually. This is something that we've known for a while. I think what will happen by COP28 is we'll know exactly where we stand. And of course, like I said, I think there will be a legally binding document, a document that will basically describe exactly how, because the steering committee is going to make sure of that. So everybody's agreed to make that investment, spend that money. We just now need to know how it's going to be spent and where it's going to go and how it's going to go and in what form.
Right. And do you think then, I was talking to one of the experts and he said this was expected to be a low outcome COP because of the massive Pakistan floods, which nobody could deny, right? Like Pakistan floods were the biggest proof of what climate change is doing to people now. And of course, there were forest fires in Europe. This year was overall pretty heavy on extreme weather events across the globe. So to deny this anymore, or to say loss and damage conversation abhi can be on the backseat, was very difficult this year. And since you didn't really expect anything else, like climate finance, not really much happened. So you were like, okay, fine, let's sort of push it on the front of loss and damage. But this expert said this was going to be a low-income COP. But also going ahead, we have sort of begun to hit the threshold of global negotiations. Because so far, we were agreeing on things that were relatively easy to agree on. So these negotiations were yielding sort of big results. Going forward, it might not be as simple because countries and their political interest, and like now the idea of most vulnerable within the developing countries. So there's a rift between the G77. And so do you think going forward, global negotiations are going to become more difficult or yield less?
No, I think they will become easier and they will yield more because there are just too many facts that the world is confronted by. And I think it's become very glaringly evident that economies are going to be hit by the climate crisis. And I think when we all can easily agree to the fact that when it is a matter of money, human beings behave. they do what needs to be done. So my guess is that Mother Earth is going to tell us all that अगर पैसा कमाना है तो करना पड़ेगा boss. And it is like when you mentioned what happened with Pakistan this year, it's also the number associated with that crisis. Look at what the loss is, right? Of course, there's social loss and there's been devastating damage to property and lives and livelihood and all of that and loss of lives. But what does it do to the economy of a country? How does that impact the world?
Loss.
Yeah. So I think my guess will be that politicians will have to care about the crisis and they will have to start moving the needle in the right direction. I think we're already moving the needle in the right direction. And the fact that India is chairing the G20, India will have, I think, a very significant role to play in negotiations going forward and bringing countries together to ensure that we have a very specific plan and engagement on how we're going to deal with the climate crisis.
Correct. Diya, my last question to you is, again, you can choose to not answer this, but if Coca-Cola came to you with a brand deal, what would your response personally be? And you can customize the ad. So here it's a thought experiment. So you can really imagine and sort of work around however.
No, there's nothing to imagine. I wouldn't endorse Coca-Cola.
At all?
No, at all.
That's so cool, but it's just...
Yeah.
See, this is why, I mean, no wonder people in the industry are not sort of as vocal about it, because it comes at a cost, right? Like this is... I mean, not just money, but a lot of other things also. But okay, for instance, if they let you...
But
exactly
Sadhika,
like you said,
I've reached a point in my life where I don't do anything that feels counterintuitive. I don't operate for money. I mean, yes, money is important. Today, maybe I am lucky enough to be in a place where I feel financially secure enough to be able to refuse money, right? But everybody wants to make money and everybody is happier to make more money.
And why not? Yeah.
And why not? But no, there are the values and the principles are very basic, and they hold true for everything.
If they tell you you can design the campaign, like maybe a part of you being the face of it has to do something with like you said, like unless you recycle all your plastic bottles.
Interestingly, I know that Coca-Cola in India recycles a very, 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 very high percentage of the plastic. So because of not just the formal but the informal sector of waste management. So this I know for a fact. But there are just certain things that we shouldn't do. I mean, I can name other companies that I've said no to. I'm not going to get into that right now. But if something doesn't work for you, at this stage, the only response to have is no.
I just hope maybe COP was as virtuous as you. And then they would have said, listen, a lot of money, but we won't take it.
COP as a platform is virtuous, and thank God it is, right? It brings the right minds together. It brings the science together. I think that emissions gap report was just like a huge intervention. It was something that I think we all needed to read, and global leaders needed to read, and policymakers needed to see and understand that we are so far behind the agreement, that commitment that we made at the Paris Agreement, right? And that we just have to start mobilizing and accelerating action at a much more heightened speed. So I think COP as a platform is critical, it's important, It's necessary. And I just feel that more and more stakeholders are going to become better informed, and hopefully we will be able to see the change that we need.
Correct. But I guess this was a lovely, lovely conversation, Dia. Thank you so much for talking to us. I had a lot of fun. I am sure so did our listeners. And thank you for sharing so many personal stories from your life. I'm sure they're supremely inspiring, and also just, largely even beyond the conversation on climate, just to sort of give up and stand for what you believe in. I think that's super amazing. So kudos to you. And thank you so much.
Thank you, Sadhika. It was good fun. Thanks.